tag. I guess I'm it. So I have been tagged to participate in the 75 hard video challenge, where I, along with a few of my other colleagues, will be posting one video every day for the next 75 days as an opportunity to build our consistency, to build our brand awareness, and most importantly, for us to be able to connect to our audience and just really get to know you, or at least allow you to get to know me. However, I am a presenter. I'm a trainer at heart. I am used to working with a live audience, so I feed off of your energy. Even though I know that, I'm not getting your energy right now, I want you to leave comments in this video. Let me know what resonates with you, what you like. Tell me what you don't like. And let's just make it a conversation, and I'll make sure that I respond to as many comments as I can, okay? So first, let me start by introducing myself. My name is Flora Gomez again, and I have been in early childhood education for 20 years now. I don't know what it is, but I get so excited to share. It's been a 20-year journey, and I've had some really wonderful experiences along the way. I started, yes, very early. I was 5, okay? That's all you need to know. No, in all seriousness, I started in the field. Actually, it's been longer than 20 years, because when I really think about it, I count the time like early in college when I got my first job. I'll tell you about that in just a moment. But it really started in high school when I was a camp counselor, and I was like, girl, you have been knocking off some of those years and not giving yourself enough credit. But I got my first job working with young children as a counselor, a camp counselor, while I was in high school. And it just so happened that I was assigned to the preschool group. And I think it's because I was still kind of close in age with the older children, and then I had a younger sibling in the program. So they thought it would be a great idea and opportunity for me to work with preschool. Now, that is not where I decided that, oh my God, I want to be a preschool teacher and work in early childhood. It wasn't any of that. It literally was a summer job. I got a check every 2 weeks. I was able to go get my nails done and put minutes on my cell phone and hang out at the mall with my friends. That's all it was. It was nothing about the role that made me think I wanted to commit my life to it. However, I think that it did plant a seed for me. And now that I'm looking back, I learned so much, but I wasn't paying attention. You know how sometimes you go through things, you have experiences, but because it's not a part of the plan that you have in the moment, you kind of discount the opportunity. And that's what I did. And I give myself lots of grace. I was a child, a teenager, right? Very similar to my own teenagers that I have now. So I get it. But I did start my career early in college, straight out of high school. About 20 years ago, I was actually in school enrolled in the elementary education program. I just knew that third grade was going to be my jam, okay? Because the children are not too old in third grade, and yet they're not too young. They've gained some independence. They understand routines. So I really imagined myself being this teacher. I always like to write on the board. So I knew I would be writing on a chalkboard because I grew up with chalkboards. Now we have dry erase, right? But I just pictured myself being this teacher at the board and running small groups and having this great independent but yet still moldable group of third graders. That was the sweet spot for me. However, even I believe it had to have been the fall. I was minding my business one day, and I got a phone call from my dad, and he says, hey, I met this lady. She has a daycare. I think you can help her. And I'm like, pause. Like, what are you talking about? And long story short, he had met this woman out, and I think he was trying to talk to her, and she shared that she had a home daycare program. And he's like, oh, well, my daughter's in school to be a teacher. She can come help you improve your daycare, because, of course, my dad is like one of my biggest fans. So the way he talks about me, he will convince anybody that I can do anything. And I appreciate it. A lot of stuff he recommends me for, I really can do it. But sometimes I'm like, dude, you can't be telling people that. Like, I don't even know if I had taken my first official classes as an education major yet. I was probably still doing gen eds, but he talked me up, and she was saying, well, actually, she needed an assistant at that time. So he put me on the phone with her, and she was like, yes, your dad told me that you're studying education. I'm actually looking for an assistant at this time. So we exchanged contact information, and we actually scheduled time for me to come to her home and visit her home childcare program, her home daycare, and to see if it would be a good fit for me to be an assistant. Even though I scheduled that appointment, y'all, I was like, you know what? This is weird. Like, I called my dad back, like, dude, you can't be using me to pick up chicks. Like, what is going on here? I'm minding my business, freshman in college, doing my own little thing, not thinking about working in the field right now. But something told me to go ahead and go. So I went after class one day on a day that we scheduled. She gave me a tour. I got a chance to meet the children, and I was like, ooh, I actually think I might like this. So I started working, and we have been together ever since. I worked for her as an assistant, and I just really fell in love with the babies. And it just so happened that I started falling in love with young children and being curious about how they learned and how they developed. Because remember, I wanted to be a third grade teacher. So the ideas I had about what teaching was, even though completely not it, right? The way I thought then is definitely not the way that I think now. But it was totally different. It opened my eyes to a whole different world. I honestly didn't even know that early childhood was a thing. Yes, I went to preschool. Yes, I went to a childcare program, but I did not have respect for the profession because I just thought about it as being daycare. Even I attended daycare, right? But just seeing education and seeing how she taught those children and how they had routines and structure and all of the things that I didn't know were a part of early childhood education inspired me to change my major. It also didn't help that I had a class at the time with a professor. Bless his heart, he had the thickest accent that I could not understand. I think it was like a philosophy of education class or something like that. So I struggled because I couldn't understand his accent. Because it was philosophy, it was a lot of lecture. I didn't understand half of what he was talking about. And normally I'm pretty resilient. Like, I'll read the textbook, I'll maybe do some office hours. This man wrote the textbook to the class. There was no way I was going to pass. He was the only person who taught it, and I was just like, you know what, I don't even like this anymore anyway. So I changed my major from elementary education and doubled down into early childhood, and I really haven't turned my back and looked back since. I went on to eventually work in childcare centers and kind of worked my way through traditional trajectories, right? Started off as an assistant, and then I saw a job advertised. It was pretty close to where I was living at the time, and I applied for an assistant position, and they were like, you sure you have enough credits to be a lead teacher? Had no idea that I was teacher qualified. First real gig. At first I drowned. It sucked. They asked what age group I wanted to work with, and I'm like, I want to work with preschool, because in my mind I want to be a real teacher, right? I like the idea of instruction. I was that child who was always playing school, so I would line up my teddy bears and my dolls and just, you know, create a classroom. I was always writing lists. My mom tells me to this day, she was like, oh my God, you was always creating lists and handouts and worksheets. And I would sit my little brother down. He had to have been about 5 or 6, and make him learn words out of this Spanish textbook. Like, at this time, I don't even know where I got the Spanish textbook from, but I would do lessons and I would create my attendance sheets and all this thing. So these ideas that I had of what a teacher was really required me to work with older children, because I wanted to take what I knew and the knowledge that was in my head and really just kind of transfer it to them. And I think that my path ended up being the way it was, to help me really understand what teaching is and what it means to work with young children. So I did a lead teacher. I finished the early childhood education program, got my teaching license, and I started applying just like my classmates were doing to the school district. I applied everywhere, like the district that I lived in, the neighboring suburbs. I did not get one call back. And now that I look back on it, some days I'm like, yes, that was just like, a blessing, because it pushed me in the direction that I was supposed to go in. Now I look back, I'm like, you applied to all these jobs and you didn't get one call back. Either I didn't do the applications right or my resume was trash. Either way, it's still true that I was directed to where I needed to be. So I went in as a lead teacher in a childcare program, brand new program where they needed a licensed teacher. So it was like state funded pre-K as well as Head Start. And that's where I really learned what it meant to be an early childhood teacher. And I'm grateful because the year that program, or that I started working in that program, like they had new curriculum that they were implementing. So with that, the partnership and the Head Start agency we collaborated with, they did so much training. When I tell you, I was at a training almost every couple of weeks, but that was such a gift because I really learned how to implement early childhood curriculum. So I worked there for a few years, and I absolutely love teaching. I was always coming up with ideas and collaborating with coworkers, and then I ended up I had my second daughter, which was exciting, right? I got married over that time, and we were having our second baby. But when the baby got here, it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. It was really challenging for me as a young mom with two young children, and working with children all day and then coming home to my own children and still needing to give them attention was just a bit much. So my daughter was maybe a few months old. Over the summer, I transitioned into another program where I became an administrator. And I actually ended up working as an infant toddler specialist on site where I supervised the birth to 3 teachers. And there I'm like, oh my goodness, I really thought that I loved working with young children, right? So I've already switched my major from elementary ed, and my hopes and dreams of being a 3rd grade teacher, I just balled them up, threw them in a trash can, and then I transitioned into early childhood where I just knew this would be my jam, teaching preschool and kindergarten. One year, that last year in a classroom, I even had a split classroom, so I got a chance to teach both preschoolers and kindergartners. But when I got that position as an infant toddler supervisor and I was responsible for working directly with teachers, that's where the light bulb went off. It was like, girl, this is your jam. This is what you were created to do. So I started there. And the program I worked with had a new grant. So the grant was for birth to 3, and they had never administered this program before. So there were a lot of systems and things that needed to be created and put into place. And of course, I was young, I was green, I had no clue what I was doing. I tell my former boss all the time. As a matter of fact, on my business anniversary, I text her like, thank you so much, because like, you hired me. I had no experience doing what I was doing. I didn't have a clue, but what I had was drive. And I was very ambitious. I was willing to learn. I went back, I took more classes, and I enrolled in school. And then I also, now that I think about it, I just really had somebody who trusted me enough that I would figure it out. And of course, I made mistakes along the way. I messed up a lot of stuff, but I stuck with it. I was committed to really building a great infant and toddler program. And over time, we did great things in that program. I got promoted to director. And my biggest goal as a child care director was to bridge our infant and toddler program and our preschool program, because at the time I was over birth to 3, and I had another colleague who was over the preschool program. And so it was like two different systems that didn't really talk to each other. So I was like, oh, as a director, now I was responsible for supporting the whole program, right? Birth to 5. I wanted to streamline. I wanted to make sure that the infants, toddlers, and twos got what they need, but that we were also building a pipeline, if you will, or what do you call it? I don't know the term that I'm looking for, and I was just talking about it with an administrator last week, but that, what is the word? It's not a pipeline, but it's that continuum where the children move from one class to the next. I wanted that to be seamless, the transitions from basically our 2-year-old classroom into preschool. And I wanted the preschool teachers to have a great foundation to work on. So I got a chance to bridge a lot of those gaps and really create the structure of that program. And that's where I really put in the work and I learned the most. I learned how to build a program culture, because when I tell you, in the beginning, I was a tyrant, right? Like my first maybe couple of weeks, month on the job, I was so excited to finally have a supervisor position. Like it was my first time being in a leadership role. Leadership in quotes, right? I was a manager or a supervisor. That doesn't necessarily equate to leadership. I was happy to be in charge of other adults. Okay. Even though I had little children at home who I could be the boss of and they wouldn't push back, but the authority to, be the boss over somebody else was really exciting to me until I had like this awakening, and I realized that if you don't build relationships and foster a team, you're not going to have a team to build. Like you're not going to be the boss of anybody. So I really started going on this journey of really figuring out who I was, because now it's different. It was different for me working with adults than it was with children. I didn't have to do much soul searching when working with young children. I understood what my philosophy of education was. I knew what it was that I wanted from my students. I knew how to give that to them. But when it came to adults, it was another whole situation. So I had to really figure out, who am I? I remember when I first got hired and the owner of the childcare center was just like, yeah, I like for the supervisor to kind of be laid back or this and that. And I realized I was being a chameleon. At every job I went to, up until then, I was kind of conforming to who somebody else wanted me to be. And when I showed up as that person who wasn't like really me, I realized that they don't like me. And not only did the teachers not like me, I didn't like me. I'm like, this doesn't feel natural. And I had to kind of tap into, who is Flora, right? What is my real leadership style? And I had to say, girl, I am a tough love type of leader. To know me is to love me. But one thing that all of my people say is, Miss Gomez don't take no stuff, right? And I attribute that to my favorite teacher in the whole wide world, Joe Clark. Yes, I was a lean on me kid. That is like the first movie that I can remember seeing an educator that I was like, whoa, I like them. So I was raised by Joe Clark. Okay, he had to come in and clean up some things at Eastside High, and I think that was just the mentality I had. But one of the things that I took away, and now as a more mature adult and having a lot more leadership experience under my belt, I think subliminally those things were kind of ingrained in me, or maybe subconsciously is more of the word that I'm looking for. But I took away so much. Even though Mr. Clark was tough and sometimes he was harder than was necessarily what was required, he did start to build relationships with his students, with his staff. He had very high expectations and standards, and that's just who I was, right? It wasn't that I was mean or I was trying to be a hard, insert that word there. I wasn't trying to give people a hard time. I just had really high standards and expectations, and I had high hopes for the children and the families that we work with in the community. So I was thinking, I don't know another way, right? And I've always been given the space to operate in excellence. So I don't know anything different. That's where my drive and my ambition was going toward. So we created a great culture over time. I was happy and excited to, like, I need to fire people, right? Yes, I did need to let some people from the team go, but it was for reasons that, they didn't necessarily align. So part of it was, no, they really don't align with the mission and the vision and what we're trying to do for the program. And the other part was my ego. So once I acknowledged that part was ego, like, you just didn't like her and she didn't like you, so you thought you got to fire her. I just look back on a lot of conversations. My boss was just like, you can't just fire people because y'all don't get along. Like, you're going to have to figure out how to make it work. And that's where I really developed people skills and leadership skills and learning how to communicate and collaborate. It was not easy, okay? I would have preferred, I'm like, look, you can send me back to the preschool classroom, because 4-year-olds are only going to argue so much. They only have so much capacity to go back and forth and to challenge you, or they challenge you in ways that are different than what other adults would do. But I'm glad that I stuck it in there and we got a chance to do great things. By the time I left that program, I was supporting we had like partner other sites within the organization. So my boss had like asked me to help them and mentor them and show them how you do your paperwork and how you organize. So it went from being a very horrible leader on the verge of getting fired, because I remember every week saying I wanted to fire somebody. She's like, you know what? If you can't get your team together, then how about I just fire you? And I was like, well, you can't do that, because I just quit my job and I have 2 small children at home and I can't afford to get fired. And plus, nobody else was hiring me for a teacher position. So please don't fire me. So I got myself together. But I went from not knowing what I was doing at all to becoming a mentor for other directors. And I did it in such a short period of time. One of the things I like to remind people that it doesn't necessarily, like, the years doing work doesn't equate always to good experience. And for a long time, I used to be very self-conscious about my age, because I would show up to work and meetings with different organizations, and a lot of my colleagues were older than me. Some of them were even the same age as my parents, right? And I learned over time, okay, I won't talk about my age. And when I'm in a professional setting, I would show up sometimes and appear to be a bit more mature than I was. I remember I was working at another organization, and I just so happened to mention to one of the directors that I was celebrating my 30th birthday. And she said, "You're what?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm turning 30. She was like, "There's no way I would have ever believed that you're only 30. She was like, "I would have given you much older, not because you look older, but because you just present yourself a little bit older." And I'm like, right, yeah, you just don't know that deep down inside I am a whole big kid, right? But when it comes to my work, I've always been just a little bit more mature. I like to be focused. I'm very driven and ambitious. So yeah, I did that, and then I transitioned to working as an infantile specialist. I left the childcare setting and went into training. I went to a training and I met a colleague there, and she told me about the position that I didn't even know existed, right? So we have the resource and referral agencies that support providers, and they support parents in finding childcare, and even some will support in paying for childcare. Anyway, she was an infantile specialist, which was a free consultant that the county provided for centers and home daycares to support their program. So we just talked. I was really impressed with her work, and she mentioned that she does consulting and she does training, and I was thinking I want to be a trainer, because a part of my role before I left being a director, we needed to get our teachers CDA trained. So I actually started training and doing professional development, like in the context of my job. We had hired a consultant to come in and do the CDA, and my staff was like, Ms. Gomez, we want you to teach us. Because I had been doing trainings. What I thought was a staff meeting was really a PD workshop. So I wasn't going over policies and handbooks and all of that. I was taking what I saw happening in the classroom. And when we met for staff meetings, I would just share, strategies for improvement, things that the whole program needed to work on. I would pull my teachers out and have, individual team meetings. I was doing one-on-one reflective supervision. So what I was doing was professional development. But again, this was like my first leadership position. I had guidance, but not really. I was kind of allowed to do my own thing, if you will. So I was creating models for PD without even realizing it. So when I met my colleague at this training and she told me what she does, I'm like, you get to do training in your job? I want to do training. And so we exchanged contact information. At that time, that position, like, you're not going to ever get that job. The people who got those jobs had been there for years and they don't leave. They like either retire, move out of town, or they probably die. And every blue moon, somebody might be terminated, but that just didn't happen that often. So when the position became open, she called me. I remember I was at Erickson Institute downtown. My colleague, my friend, my soror, we were at a training together, doing something with the Fussy Baby Network. I still remember to this day. I missed her call and she left a voicemail and said, hey, we met a while back at a training. You told me you were interested in training and you were also interested in this position. I just wanted to let you know we got one slot open on our team. Bet. I called her back. She never answered the phone for me. I went ahead and applied for the position anyway, because I'm like, well, I wanted to, see, can I list you as a referral? I want to know a little bit more about the position. I always want to know more about the position, but she didn't call. She didn't text back, nothing. I put it through. I still put her name on the application anyway, even though she didn't call me back. And I ended up getting an interview, and long story short, I got hired for the job. So I went and did that, and I was like, now I get to see what it's really like to be a consultant. Again, even though this position had been going for a while, when I got there, I got kind of like my manuals. I got the orientation. I absolutely love the team I worked on. But what I noticed is that almost everybody approached their work differently. So the first maybe month or so, I was out shadowing other specialists, and then I even shadowed a couple of people from other teams that we partner with. And I'm like, in these 2 months, I've never seen two people do the same thing. Now, again, I'm still new, fresh, bringing a fresh perspective, and don't have a lot of extensive experience at this point to be able to identify what the thing is. Looking back, it was systems, right? Consistent systems. Everybody wasn't doing the same thing in their work. So I created my own system for working with programs. I started getting on the phone, reaching out and saying, hey, I saw that you recently worked with a specialist from our team. I want you to know that I'm available for you. I can come out and introduce myself, or do you need support? And I started building relationships with the programs in my service area from there. And I started to create my consulting model that I still use now. Again, looking back, I had no clue what I was doing. It's just what intuitively made sense to me. And I wanted a system that I can duplicate. So if I'm out in the field Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I want to be able to kind of come and do the same thing Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Just like as a teacher, I had a routine and structure in the classroom. Even as a director, I created routines and structure for myself. So when I got to this new position, there wasn't really anyone kind of standing over me telling me, okay, do this, do that. It was just well, this is how this person does it, and this is how this other person does it, and you can kind of find your flow. I appreciate the freedom to do my own thing. I love to do my own thing. However, I'm like, because I'm so flat, I like to go where the wind blows me. I don't like to be tied down. But because I know and understand that about myself, I knew the value of having repeatable systems, right? So when I leave ABC childcare and go down the street to 123 childcare, I want to be able to do the same processes. So I created that for myself. I happened to be working with another colleague in the office one day, and she shared that, she was applying for a position as an assessor. And at this time, I was still so new in this role. I was like, I cannot transition into another job right now. I'm still learning the job that I'm doing. But again, I had no idea what these different roles were. So I'm in a new role as an infantile specialist, which is essentially a consultant that focuses on birth to 3. And then I'm introduced to this new role, which is an assessor. And the position required the team to go out, do high stakes assessment. At the time, they were reporting to like the State Board of Education, and as well as the Department of Human Services, and that's who kind of facilitates our QRIS program. So I learned about the position. I was like, no, thank you. I don't want to do that. I love what I'm doing right now. And what I didn't realize, of course, is again, a seed was planted that eventually would be nurtured. Again, those positions rarely ever opened up. And now I talk to some of my former coworkers, and we laugh about how those positions never came open. Like, yeah, you're not getting on that team unless somebody retires, moves away, quit, get fired. Like, it was just rare. It was not one of those types of jobs where it was always open for people to apply. So passed it up. I went to trainings. I started attending more trainings because that organization I worked with trained our teams in the assessment tools because we use them to coach and in our consulting. So I was starting to go there, and one day the executive director at the time came into the lunchroom where we were having lunch, and she shared that there was a position open. There were 2 positions open on their team, or maybe it was 1. Anyway, I wasn't interested in the position, okay? I don't want to do that job is what I'm saying to myself in my head. But then she mentioned all of the benefits that came along with it, and she said, free tuition. And I said, I'll take it, right? And that's because one of my goals at the time was to go back to school and get my master's degree. So I took an opportunity. I'm like, okay, well, I can learn this job, but I don't want to take out any more student loans. So if it means being able to go to school for free and get my degree, I think I'll look more into it. And so I did. I looked into it. I applied, got all the way to the end interviews, and guess what? Somebody else got the job. Took my position. And at first I was like, well, maybe this isn't for me. And then I was like, no, something is going to happen. Because one of my other coworkers had already left the same team I was currently on and went over. A couple of them actually did. And so I'm like, I'm following you. I'm coming with y'all. And so they were like, well, come on or whatever. But they were still new, so they didn't have much plug. It wasn't like a good referral was going to work out. But it ended up being that one of somebody else ended up leaving, and it opened up another spot, and I think I was the next candidate in line. So I ended up getting the position. Again, rare positions, they are not readily accessible all the time. And so I found myself in this role, and I decided, my position on the other team was very short-lived, and I would have loved to stay. However, I saw an opportunity that could help me progress in my education and my career even further. So I was like, girl, take it. Or eventually I would have gone back to school to get my master's degree, but I was just like, well, why not go ahead and do it now? My children were still young. I was still young. I still had energy. I had enough energy to go to work, go to class, do dance class on the weekends with kids, and still go out and party all night too. So do it while you're young. Anybody who's young, do it. I promise. Do it while you're young. Once you get a certain age, your body start doing different stuff. Do it while you're young. So I did. I ended up getting a position. Of course, you have to work for so long before you get a chance to take care of those benefits. And I did. I really learned my tool. I worked hard to become a reliable assessor, meaning that when they send me out in the field, they can trust that my data collection is going to be accurate. So I really did focus on learning the job. And I think I was also a hard worker because, you know, I'm like, I'm getting this benefit. I'm allowing them, or they're allowing me to work with them, and also to pay for my education. The least I can do is show up and be a great employee. And I really did. I pride myself on being a great example. I started doing work with other teams, just showing up doing me, right? I presented at my first conference while I was in that role. Of course, I had applied months before I had even applied for that position, right? I had applied to present at the first conference, and I went and did that. And so people really started to take notice. I remember one of the leaders saw some content that I wrote in my training. She's like, I want to talk to you about this. And so we dug deep. We ended up taking one of the lines, or one of the ideas that I had in my trainings. I'll never forget. Feed the teachers or they'll eat the children was the presentation I did at that conference. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But that's actually one of the trainings, one of my signature trainings that I have now. It all comes for full circle. But she wanted to explore some of those topics. She's like, yes, I think we can use this in this training content. I ended up writing a few blogs. I ended up joining some of the committees in the organization. And it was just a great experience overall. And I promise, I'm like, okay, I have to stay here and stay put. Don't switch jobs anymore. So I did. I stayed, and I got to, well, I will say this though. My goal in life was I never wanted a 5-year award from any company, at least not from working in the same position. Because I like to grow. I'm ambitious. I'm eager. I want to constantly be learning something new. So I just always felt like if I'm staying in the exact same role, doing the same work, then I'm not. I would rather learn and move quickly, and so that's kind of the trajectory I took. So a couple of years later, there was like a supervisory position open. Of course, I applied for it because why not? Again, those supervisor roles don't come open that often. So I applied for it. I didn't get the job. Of course I didn't get the job, right? It ended up working out. I ended up having some personal medical challenges that wouldn't have allowed me to show up and do the job anyway. So it worked out. But a few months, maybe even about 8 to 9 months later, another position opened up because a new team was launching. And so I ended up applying for that position, and it worked out that I got it. And so I got to help and be a part of launching a brand new team using brand new assessment tools. So that means we had to create new systems. And I just remember sitting downtown in the office, me and our director, and I tell you, it was literally us in an empty office with maybe like a few desks and cubes and chairs. The walls were bare. It was like not a workplace that we were used to working in, because we were used to working in like beautiful spaces where you go to the bathroom, you had nice pictures on the wall, or you come in, you have nice paints and nice tables and plants and soft touches. That's what I was accustomed to. When we were downtown, I was like, it's a little dusty in here, right? But we just sat and brainstormed And I am forever grateful because she gave me the space to share my ideas. I'm like, I got all these ideas, right? We need to create a new hire orientation, and we need a training plan, and I want the onboarding to be great, and I want us to build a team and the culture. And she was like, okay, let's do it. And just being able to be a part of the decisions that went into putting together something brand new is something that I always cherish, right? Because it allowed me to, again, be back in a leadership role. I was going into a coordinator role where I would be supervising other assessors now. So now we have to, I think we still have some hiring to do. We did, because half of the team was already hired, and then the other half we still had to interview and hire, and then we had to do training and certifications and all of this. So to be a part of a startup team and start from scratch essentially was exciting for me. It was like this thing, I don't know how to describe it, but it was just so fueling. Like, it gave me life. I love a great challenge, and I'm starting to realize, and I was just talking to someone the other day about, like, I do really well with startup teams. Give me a brand new team or a brand new program. Like, you need systems, you need processes, you need people. I'm your girl. I could do it. So we really worked together, and we had other leaders who joined our team over time. They kind of like trickled in, and we just really built this dope leadership team. And not just the leadership team, but the team as a whole. We did some great work together. We built a great culture. I was very adamant about having a positive work culture and making it a place that people wanted to be. And I would say some controversial things sometimes, like, if people come in here, I want us to be so tight. I want us to have our stuff so much together that if they're not rocking with us, I want them to leave, right? If they bring in negative energy, goodbye. And I even shared, I think I got in trouble for this, but I even shared at a meeting, if this is not the place for you, I invite you to go find another job, and I will happily write you a letter of recommendation. And I said it and I meant it, because I just think culture is everything. We created core values. One of my core values is always going to be fun. Okay, no matter what team I work on, even for my company, Teach for Teachers, like, fun is at the top of the list. I am the person who went to work, for one, because they told me I had to come into the office. I still have a grudge about that. I had been used to working kind of remote, right? I worked from home unless I was out on the road to do assessment work. But other than that, I had a lot of autonomy. So going to the office every day, all day, I'm like, why am I here? So I had to find my purpose in commuting to work and being an in-office employee after I had not done that for years. And I just decided that my purpose in going to work was to socialize, to have lunch. So we would get to work at about 8:30. And before my coworkers could take their coats off, I was asking what we were eating for lunch. Okay, because you're not gonna have me coming downtown every day and not think I'm going to Starbucks. And we had, what do we have? Starbucks, a Potbelly. We had a lot of nice little restaurants in walking distance. So summertime, it was lit, especially when the food trucks were out downtown. Don't get it twisted. We did our work. Okay, I don't want no rumors started. We did our work. But I, Flora Gomez, decided that I was going to work for the coffee breaks, for the food trucks, for the walks around the corner to our favorite restaurants, to the cafeteria, right? Like, I came to work to socialize. As a matter of fact, I did most of my work at home in the evening because I was at work talking too much. So yeah, I was that kid in school. I definitely talked a lot. And you know how they say, for everybody who got checks on their report card for talks too much, what do you do now? Yes, I talk for a living. So there you have it. I got really excited. I had my third baby while I was on that team, and it was exciting. Like, bringing a new baby, and it allowed me to, feel connected to the field again in a different way, because now I get to really flex all of my child development knowledge because I got a new baby at home. And truth be told, my children were kind of like my guinea pigs. When I had my first daughter, I was finishing up college, so I got a chance to just practice all of my theory on her. I had a project in class where I had to assess a child. I would use my own baby. Then my middle daughter, a lot of the work I was doing, she was kind of in preschool during that time. But then getting back into, doing the different tools and the infants and the toddler assessment tool. Well, perfect. I have an infant at home. And I was on the phone with one of my colleagues who does assessment work, and we were talking about the class assessment. If you're not familiar with the class, it's a tool that measures staff-child interactions, and we're looking at how those interactions between teachers and young children push the learning forward, right? How do we lead to more learning, more language development? How are we supporting their overall development, right? And so she would say, oh my God, like the way you are getting those class points, because I'm asking open-ended questions, I'm giving feedback, so I'm really doing this dance with my children, and essentially I'm practicing what I want to see in the tool when I do assessment. So I know the value of, parallel talk or self-talk. So when I'm walking around the house, I'll just narrate what I'm doing. Mommy is going to the refrigerator. I'm going to get me a Pepsi out. I'm going to pour it over ice because, baby, I need this caffeine. Do you hear that fizzling? Ooh, do you like the sound of that? Those are the types of conversations I had with my child. When I read books to my children, I know the value and importance of reading children's books. However, like when I was in college, I had to read textbooks. So I have to decide, am I going to read my textbooks or are we going to read these baby books? So I joke now, my oldest daughter, she just turned 16, and the vocabulary, she uses words like she had a party with her friends this past weekend, and they were using vocabulary words that I'm like, I don't know what those were. I'm like, what does that mean? But I'm just so proud and impressed. But there's this picture I have of her. She had to have been maybe 2 or a little bit under 2 years old. It was one of my textbooks from school that said language development. Like, hilarious. I love it. I'm like, yeah, she gets it, honestly. That's the kid who was probably reading the dictionary and the thesaurus at 4. I didn't pressure her to do that. She's just a little excited to learn. I was going to call her the N word, but I don't know if people would get offended. I'm a nerd, so I think it's okay. I like nerds. But anyway, just in case you don't like to use that term, my daughter is an eager learner. Okay. So yeah, I had my baby and the pandemic hit. Like, I had her in January and the pandemic hit. And when I thought I was on my way back to work, I got a memo like, no, you're going to actually stay at home and work. So I had to kind of navigate remote learning and infants. It was totally nuts. Okay. Like, who does this? I always share, I have a couple of friends who homeschool their children, and then I have a few friends who are stay-at-home moms. And I would say things like, who does this on purpose? And I realized, girl, your friends do. So kudos to my homeschool moms and my stay-at-home moms. I have so much respect for you and what you do for your families and for your children, and just know that I will never voluntarily do it. I was just talking to my daughter's teacher the other day, and I was just like, yeah, I never had children with the intention that I would stay at home with them all day. Like, that wasn't a thing. After a couple of months, you go to childcare, I go back to work, I'll pick you up at 6 so we can come home and do all the things that we're supposed to do in the evening, and then night, okay? I just never desired to be the mom who stayed at home with my children all day, every day. As y'all can see, I don't know if you're noticing, if you pick it up what I'm putting down, I don't like doing the same thing all day, every day. I need variety. I need some mental stimulation and challenges. However, some stuff you got to do what you got to do, right? It is what it is. You don't get to decide this is boring, you're not going to do it. So don't get it twisted. I know how to put my head down and be quiet and do my work and not disrupt my coworker. I mean, my coworkers they're not in the same room with me anymore. So I think that's why my productivity is so high and why my colleagues get their work done, because we're not sitting in a room together. Now, if you put us in the office together, it's a wrap. We're not working. So yeah, that was the assessment team there. I had a baby, came back from maternity leave. COVID kind of shut everything down. We're working from home. I ended up getting my girls off to school that year and deciding that I think I want to go back into like direct services, training and consulting. I had started working with a program, kind of like on the side consulting. One of my mentors reached out and said, you know what? She was ready to open up one of her centers that closed during the pandemic, and she asked if I would be willing to kind of help take that project on. And I'm like, yes. Of course, me being ambitious, I'm always in over my head, right? And I'm just like eager, excited to do things. And not that I was in over my head that I couldn't do it. I was in over my head because we were in the middle of a pandemic. I had children at home doing remote learning. I had a full-time job and I had an infant. And so now I'm going to help open a center that has been closed during the pandemic. But I did it. Like, we went through licensing. And when I say we, I kind of be me and my imaginary friends in my head. No, I had people who came to help me kind of get the center up, and I reorganized and rearranged the classrooms. But I went through the licensing process. I had to get new staff in there, and we had to do enrollment because due to the closure, the staff that worked there ended up, of course, getting other jobs if they could. And then the children went elsewhere, right? So we had to basically recreate a whole new program. And I did that. It became a bit much doing that while still working a full-time job. And so we ended up having a conversation. She like, if you're going to do this seriously, you cannot do both, right? She was like, you're wearing too thin. And then you still got small kids at home. Like, why am I always trying to do things with little bitty children? I promise I don't plan on having any more children, because I feel like every time I have a new kid, then I take on this big thing that just pushes me to my physical and mental health limits. But so I decided, okay, I'll go ahead and resign. And plus, I was also getting people were reaching out for training and consulting, right? So I already had an overflowing plate. So I'm like, okay, maybe I will resign from my full-time job and focus on building the center, focus on training. And I did. I quit my job in the middle of a pandemic when people were actually losing their jobs, right? And losing their security. I quit. I resigned. I buckled down to grow the program, to grow my training and consulting business. And I just didn't love working in the center anymore as much as I thought I would. And I don't know if it was, I don't know what clicked. I'm like, was it when no, I think this was before I caught COVID, and then COVID confirmed it. It was just so many layers, right? Like, when you're running a center, you are responsible for the children, for the teachers. You're interacting with parents. You're interacting with all of these people who are outside stakeholders. Like, you got to deal with licensing. And, it was just not what I really wanted to do. My jam is training, presenting, coaching, being able to be there with those teachers and kind of guide them and develop their practice, and being in that role where I was basically acting as an owner would, right? Having the responsibilities of the person who is really running the day-to-day operations of a center. It required me to think differently and to move differently. And I began to kind of like lose my love for the field altogether. So I decided, I'm like, you know what? I think that it's time for me to transition out, find a new staff. And luckily, you know, the team I worked with, one of the teachers, her goal was to be a director anyway. So I believe in building internally. Um, if I've never said this, I probably haven't. But when I get ready to leave a position, I believe in finding my replacement. So even with the assessment team, before I started thinking about leaving, like, it was literally me and the director down there. After our first couple of days meeting with the team, I was already tapping people. I'm like, oh, I think she would be great to replace me when I leave. I think she would be great to replace me when I leave. And at that time, I didn't even have an idea of when I would want to move on to do something else. It was still really new, so I had planned on being there for a while. It just so happened that another opportunity came up and kind of took my attention, so I decided to make a shift. But I was already ready. I shared not too long ago with my email list, like how I strategically planned my 9 to 5 exit. I didn't just wake up one day and say, okay, I think it's time for me to quit because I have a lot on my plate. No, like, I was looking at people who could potentially take my position even before we got started. And so that's always important for me, to not only think about who's going to replace me, because it's not all about me, right? Like, don't get it twisted. I'm not arrogant. I don't think that, oh, when I leave the organization, everything is going to fall apart. It's not that at all, but it's also an opportunity to kind of pull somebody else alongside, right? Open up doors for other people to train and to coach and mentor someone else. I have a background in multi-level marketing, and when I was a Mary Kay consultant, very young, I was in like college. Matter of fact, to be honest, I was selling Mary Kay when I was 16 years old in high school, because my mom and my aunt were consultants, and I would go and sell their products. And when I became 18 and I was old enough to be a consultant on my own, I was throwing parties in my house and going to other people's houses doing these parties. But one of the things that I learned that always stuck with me is that in order to grow and get a promotion, you have to replace yourself. So the way it works is, if I was an independent beauty consultant and I wanted a promotion to senior consultant, that means I had to bring another consultant up under me. If I wanted to be a team leader, that means you can't lead a team. You can't be a team leader without a team to lead. So I knew I had to have those 3 consultants. Or, you know, if I wanted my red jacket, I need 5 people. Like, I wanted the recognition. I like the titles and all of those things. They kind of feed me, you know, and I'm okay with that. I understand my personality to the fullest. I know that I'm motivated by awards and prizes, and I like recognition. I don't get a lot of recognition nowadays because in my company, we're very small, right? So my goal is to support and recognize other people. And I don't think I need the recognition as much as I used to when I was younger, right? And plus, once I learned how people use these like psychology tricks to kind of bring you in, I'm like, I don't really need that, but thank you. So yeah, I've just developed a personal philosophy that I would, in order to elevate myself, I'm not going to do it by stepping on other people, but I want to pull them up. I can only move up if I'm bringing somebody else up the ladder with me. And so in my other positions I've taken that, I remember even being a brand new director, right? I had just got that promotion, and one of the teachers who worked with me was like, Miss Gomez, I want your job. And I was like, okay. Like, well, let's talk about what it looks like, right? And we started creating a professional development plan. Baby girl, you're gonna have to go back to school. You need some more credits to even be director qualified. And those are the types of conversations I would have with my team when they started to share with me what they wanted to do. So I was never intimidated by somebody saying they wanted my job. When I hired for the center when we reopen. Some people have this thing where if they say they want to be a daycare owner, I'm not going to hire them. You want to be a director, you want to be an owner, you got to learn, right? And I think I've been okay to a degree, to a certain extent, with allowing people to learn with me, because I learned on somebody else's watch. I learned on somebody else's clock. Most of the time where I was learning how to do the job I do, somebody was paying me to do it, right? They took a chance and took my very little experience at the time and said, we're going to take a chance on you. And so now I'm at the point where I have experience, right? I've done the jobs, the positions that I coach when I'm working with either childcare owners or leaders or teachers, right? I have been in those positions and I have a perspective to see things either through your lens or through a different lens, right? I see things that you might not even recognize are really a thing in the early childhood program. So I've really used my journey, and my mission is just to support early childhood educators and really continue to push us forward as a profession. I've never really subscribed to the overqualified or glorified babysitter philosophy, but some people do still look at early educators as that. Oh, you're just watching the children, or it's just childcare, and they don't understand what all goes into supporting children's learning and development, especially at a young age. I feel like people recognize the older teachers, or not the older teachers, but like the teachers, like kindergarten, right, is where a lot of people start to feel like this is real school. And I used to be one of those people. I tell people all the time, I thank God that I don't think the way I did when I first started 20 years ago, because it was just flawed thinking. I now have a different understanding and appreciation for what we do as early childhood educators. And so I ended up, to come back to the full circle to the story, wrap it up. But I ended up transitioning out of my childcare operator role, if you will, and just focusing solely on training, coaching, and consulting. Like, I wanted to be back directly working with teachers in a capacity where I'm not in the middle of the program. So my interest in it is a little bit different. Like, when I had to think with an owner's hat or a director's hat, it's so many things you got to foster or factor in that may influence your decision making, right, and the guidance that you're given. But when I am an outsider looking in, like I tell my clients all the time, I'm working with a couple of owners now, I have nothing to lose by telling you the truth. Now, what you do with that information, of course, it's up to you. And I understand you got to factor in budgets, time, staffing, all of those things. I didn't want that pressure on me anymore. However, knowing how it feels, right? I know what it's like when you need somebody who needs to take a training, but you only have 2 staff to cover and it's not enough coverage, right? I understand what those things are like, so I'm able to better help them navigate it. But that don't mean I want to wear those shoes. And I think just being honest about who I am, what it is that I want to do, to real talk, I also couldn't see myself going to the same place every day. So now in my work, I get to work with probably different people every day or different projects. Like, I'm in the process of planning out the rest of my week. I took the holiday off, right? But just planning out my week. So some days I might focus on creating professional development plans or creating PD trainings. Another day I might actually be presenting and facilitating. Like, no 2 days in my work really look alike, and I think that's what works for me. So my journey, in addition to the professional development, right, helping teachers improve their practices in the classroom, or really supporting leaders in developing their leadership skills, I also believe in personal development, because sometimes people get in roles that seem good in theory, but it's not really a good fit for who they are as a person. And once I became really honest with myself about who I was and, what works for me, it allows me to kind of walk in my own personal pursuit and just really zone in. So all that to say, I enjoy providing professional development for teachers. I love presenting workshops. Yes, I talked too much as a child, and I am very successful today because of it, right? Like, somebody gonna pay. Stop telling those children they talk too much. You just need to teach them when it's appropriate to talk, right? And give them opportunities and outlets to express themselves, because you just never know where it's going to lead. You would have never paid me to believe that I do the work that I do now. And mainly because, again, I just wasn't aware, right? I had no idea all of the different roles and opportunities that there were in education, let alone early childhood education. I didn't know until I was in school that early childhood was a separate major, right? I just thought you needed a few credits as a childcare teacher, and that's where we go from there. So yeah, Teach for Teachers Inc. is my baby, and actually one of my business coaches told me to stop calling my baby. She was like, it's not a baby, it's a business. And so it's, again, a mentality shift, right? This is something I've been doing for a long time. I started doing it at, in my role as a director and supervisor, not even realizing I was creating professional development and I was actually training. I just thought, this is what my team need. So we're not going to sit here and talk about, frivolous things for the sake of saying we had a meeting. I'm going to actually give them the tools and the resources that they need. And of course, I've always been a big dreamer. I want to be able to support and help as many people as I can. So I just want to be able to provide that to as many people as need it, right? And those who want it. My daily affirmation every single day, without fail, I say I only work with those who want to work with me, right? So I naturally connect with people. Some people, we may vibe, we may not. Sometimes we start off thinking it'll be a good fit, and long term it doesn't, and that is okay. So again, my goal is to really help bridge the gap between what's happening in professional development and what gets applied in the classroom. So we're not just showing up to workshops, right? And I realized that was a big part of it. The reason my team was so successful is, yes, I would present a workshop to them, but then I was back in the classroom with them the next day, supporting them and implementing, so that, it wouldn't go in one ear and out the other, right? Or sometimes it's not that it goes in one ear and out the other. You just don't have the support you needed. Like, I was out at a site last week coaching, and I'm only there every so often, right? And the teacher was like, you're the only connection we have to our curriculum. Nobody on site is able to really support us here. So when it comes to, implementing best practices, a lot of things, they're winging it. They just throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to see what sticks. And so having someone like me to come in and give that guidance and support and feedback is really helpful. I know that programs don't always have the capacity to do it internally, which is why I don't mind being an outside person who comes in and helps to navigate that. As a director, I know that sometimes, especially like for smaller childcare programs, I know that a lot of times you have so many things that you're juggling on your plate. I put the director hat back on, and I just remember a day in my life would be arriving at the center. I'm cleaning up and, doing orders and reports. And sometimes I'm in the classroom, and then I might have to go in the kitchen and cook and go in the bathrooms and clean toilets, right? Like all of the things that you may have on your plate, even though you intend to give your teachers the best of what they deserve, you want to give them the best of you, you're just trying to keep the doors open and the lights on, right? So providing that professional development support may not even be in your capacity, even though you want to do it. I am happy to stand in the gap for you, to support you as you're navigating it. And sometimes I even think that, having an outside eye may provides a different perspective, right? It may be even better for your team, but everybody's needs is different. So I don't believe in a one size fits all at all. Even if I came and did a workshop for your program, it's going to be based on the unique needs of your program. So I say all that to say, I just wanted to come and share my professional journey, my experiences, how it has kind of shaped who I am today as a person and who I am as an educational leader, as a professional development provider, and what my hopes and dreams are for the field. Again, my mission is to help move us forward. I want to get teachers excited to come to work, right? I want leaders to stop micromanaging their team, to build cultures where we can really push the children and their families towards success, right? And it takes a whole, almost like raising children, right? It takes a village to do that. So if you're interested in learning more, just about Teach for Teachers or professional development, I do have a free training you can listen to called the Top 10 Professional Development Mistakes Made in Early Childhood Education. And you can just kind of see what's happening and some strategies to fix or improve upon those mistakes. You can find that link below. And let me know what resonated with you from my introduction. I know I probably shared a whole lot of personal, but it's personal and professional, and I don't always separate the two, right? I bring my professional self, I bring my personal self. What you see is kind of what you get. I love to have a great time, and at the end of the day, my job is to make sure we get the work done, but it does not have to be dull and boring. So again, let me know in the comments what's really resonated with you. Share some of your thoughts and ideas. If you disagree with something I said, tell me that too. It's okay. We can have the conversation. I look forward to another video with you tomorrow, and I promise you it won't be an hour long, but here's day one of the challenge. Thanks for rocking with me. And if you stayed all the way to the end, I might have a little something special for you. So comment the word challenge in the comments, and that way I'll know you stayed until the end, and I'll send something to you. All right. See you next time.